You're listening to Now I've Heard Everything, conversations with the icons of our time.
I was 20 years old when I began, but even then, the United States government did not ask their spies to seduce men. In fact, if we were found to have any romantic attachments, we would immediately be retired from our mission.
Former OSS and CIA spy Aline, Countess of Romanones, today on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson. It's 1943. The war in Europe is raging, and the United States and the Allies are looking for any edge they can get, including, of course, espionage. And that's where a 20-year-old model from New York comes in. Aline Griffith was recruited by the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, which of course was the precursor to the CIA. At spy school, she learned all the essentials of espionage, including ways to kill when necessary. She was then posted to Madrid, Spain, where she quickly began circulating in high social circles, scooping up intelligence from the gossip she often overheard. After the war, Aline married a Spanish aristocrat, eventually acquiring the title Aline, Countess of Romanones. And in 1987, she wrote a memoir of her World War II experience, a best-selling book called The Spy Wore Red. I first met her the following year. In a moment, my 1988 interview with Aline, Countess of Romanones.
Come back with us now as we relive a little piece of our cultural history on Now I've Heard Everything. This interview is from Bill Thompson's 30-year archive. Enjoy.
So here now, from 1988, Aline, Countess of Romanones.
You know, nowadays when I appear someplace, instead of saying, "Oh, the Countess has arrived," which I'm accustomed to since I've been a Countess for 41 years, they say, "Oh, there's the spy. The spy's come in." My husband, of course, doesn't like that very much at all.
Were you surprised that your book became such a big... It was a bestseller for a number of weeks.
Yes, it was a bestseller for 13 weeks. I was very surprised. I couldn't believe it. And now I still am surprised because I realize that in this country there are quite a few books published and that my book, which even the publisher had not printed enough copies to be prepared for such an occasion, it wasn't expecting this. But of course I'm extremely pleased.
We're very interested in espionage at this point, aren't we?
Well, you know, yes. The thing is, I was doing espionage for the United States, as I tell in this particular mission, in this story of The Spy Wore Red. But I intend to write many more books on espionage because I was doing espionage not only during World War II. At the end of World War II, I got into that spy school. I was recruited in 1943 and was sent to Spain at the end of 43 and was there 43 and 44 and 45, but then I was the only one kept on of our group, our secret intelligence group in Spain, and sent to France, and after France, a year in Switzerland, and then I was being prepared to go into Czechoslovakia, and instead I went to Spain and I married my husband. That, you know, I was very much in love. Of course, I would not have gotten married otherwise, but it did sort of make my life lose a little bit of that sort of adventure. And finally, when they did come back to me, then it was they, not being OSS, because OSS became the CIA, and asked me to do a few more jobs for them. I did after about 12 years of marriage, and I've been doing espionage more or less off and on during my lifetime, and even quite a bit in the past 7 years because I knew Bill Casey very well. He was also in secret intelligence with me during World War II, although he was in London and I was in Madrid. So I expect to write many more espionage books on missions. I think espionage is a very important topic. I think it's important for Americans to understand that espionage is part of their defense. And I also think it's worthwhile perhaps for people to read books about espionage missions that have actually occurred. Although my book reads like a novel, it is a true story.
Are people more careful about what they say in front of you now that you are a best-selling author of a true spy story?
Well, I don't think they are in this country because people realize that in the United States I'm not doing much spying. Maybe if I were to go to some of these trouble spots in the world, they might be more careful. But if I did, I would try to go perhaps with another identity. You know, we American women who marry foreigners do not lose our nationality, yet we sometimes gain a foreign passport. And of course, in this business, you can have quite a few passports if you know how to make them up. I have, of course, a Spanish passport also, with my American passport. So many places I go in as a Spanish woman, and by now I speak Spanish like a Spaniard, which is also a big asset. And one learns a lot. You know, a lifetime of doing espionage, you learn a lot of tricks of how to do it and make people think you're not doing it.
It strikes me you don't look like a spy, and it also strikes me that that's what would make you effective as a spy.
Well, one of the things I think that people generally expect is that a female spy should be telling all kinds of stories that have a little bit to do with seduction, and that the way one gets one's information is seducing men. Well, of course, I was 20 years old when I began, but even then, the United States government did not ask their spies to seduce men. In fact, we were told that if we were found to have any romantic attachments, that we would immediately be retired from our mission and put back, say, in Washington. However, today, you know, and I suppose everybody else knows, that the Russians do use that as one of their main tactics. I've found that many of our Spanish government officials, and I suppose the Americans too, and French government officials, when they go to not only Moscow, but when they go to any of the Eastern Bloc countries, they find the agreeable introduction to many very devastatingly beautiful young women. And all of those beautiful young women are placed there for reasons of obtaining one kind of power or another over the foreign visitor. So in this case, I'm afraid that the Americans will be disappointed. I cannot tell stories of having seduced men, but I can tell other very exciting stories, because in that spy school, you see, we were taught and trained in all those little tricks that spies are supposed to know how to do. Some of them that spies don't usually need to do. For example, we were taught how to kill a man in many different ways with a knife. Imagine, I was 20 years old when I learned this. Also, with a revolver, of course, with machine gun, with poison, and even with a newspaper. Do you know, they had me every day twisting a newspaper and bending it into a sharp point that was supposed to be sharp enough to kill a man if you hit him just in the right spot. Now, fortunately, I didn't have to try that, but it would not be possible, I don't think, outside the United States. Our newspaper, the quality of our paper is much better than that used in other countries, certainly than Spain, because when I got to Spain, I immediately took the newspaper and started to twist it into that point to see if, if I were going to be put on the spot with somebody and didn't have a weapon handy, I could use it. And impossible. We had jagged edges. One could never have done anything with that. But I think that generally, I learned enough of tricks that have served me in good purpose all these years. For example, we were also taught how to open a safe, how to break how to open locks on any kind of a door. So when I don't have a key, very often I can manage it. They're trying some new fancy things now with electronic doors. Now, that I don't know how to do. I
was just going to ask you, it seems that the technology has come so far in the last 40 years that if you were a 20-year-old coming into the spy business today, you'd have to learn a whole new set of tricks.
Yes, I have gone back and forth for a little fresh up courses now and then on a few things, but I think I need one for these electronic doors. I don't know how to work that, but there are machines, little equipment that can nullify that.
We've been told over the years through television and movies and I Spy and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and the James Bond series that spies have this whole bag or trench coat filled with all sorts of little devices to kill in exotic ways and to open up any kind of lock there is and to deter the enemy in any way possible. How much of that stuff did you have?
Well, to tell you the truth, I never, a lady doesn't like to, spoil the line of her dress by having too much stuff around. I usually did carry, certainly during the war, a little .25 Barretta revolver, and that saved my life on one occasion when I had to shoot a man. But normally, we used to carry some powder that would make people talk. It was called truth serum. It was just a powder you dropped into someone's drink if he'd been having too much alcohol, and you would hope that he would talk. Some of them did, and some of them did not. That we used. I remember a friend of mine who was working with me. He was a Mexican agent of secret intelligence in the war in Spain, and he used to just do this freely when he was in a nightclub, just for the fun of it, without the people that he dropped the powder in being enemies at all, and got extraordinary results. He would hear them telling their whole life story. But generally, I think we make a lot of, jokes about spying. I think people perhaps don't realize that it's very important that our intelligence agency, in my opinion, have the power of being secret. Because in comparison to intelligence agencies around the world, ours has lost a lot of its independence, and that's extremely important. The French, the West Germans, the English, the Israelis, all of them look at our intelligence service, the leaks that appear in the papers, the oversight committees, so many oversight committees, two enormous ones, one in the House of Representatives and one in the Senate. They look upon that as very amateur kind of espionage, because one realizes that espionage basically has to be secret. There has to be a possibility of covert action. And when mistakes are made by our different people trying to carry on something, such as, say, the Iran-Contra affair, which made such a scandal worldwide, they all realize, and we have spoken about this, because I go to meetings with spies from all over the world frequently. We have meetings about twice a year. I think I know all the spies there are to know who admit being so among their colleagues. And they all realize that this is an operation that takes place in large countries, in small countries, although it may seem very strange and very far out to the American public and to the public of other countries also. It's a kind of an operation that is done by dictatorships, by democracies, and of course it is necessary to do espionage in enemy countries and also in friendly countries. Otherwise, our negotiators, when they sit down at a table, they're at a great disadvantage. The fellow in front knows everything that our country intends to agree to, how far they can go in this negotiation, and maybe our man doesn't know it at all. So those kind of bunglings that happened, I think, in that Iran-Contra affair were due to the fact that it was not possible for our CIA, our professional espionage agents, to handle that operation, and it was then carried on by people who were not professional. And not only that, it was very dangerous from a point of view of the executive authority, because the blame fell upon the executive branch of our government, for which we all suffer. Whereas if that could have been done by the Iran-Contra affair, could have been solved by as professionals, they would have investigated the people who were handling the buying of the arms. They would have had at their fingertips, in fact, files on those people. And, of course, that's indispensable. So I think our country should really think very seriously about returning our intelligence services to being having the power of being secret and doing covert action.
Where does the title come from, The Spy Wore Red?
Well, again, people say, because what were you doing wearing red in that book? Well, no, I wasn't wearing red. But I think that people should realize that all spies, I did that because I feel that spies are not always those people who are hiding behind a bush or a tree or in a boarding house. Spies are often out there in lights, in red, in the most obvious sense, because they are perhaps in our government. Not perhaps, certainly. We must have spies in our government who have not yet been uncovered. Spies on the radio. Let's hope that you're okay.
Whoops.
Spies in our television, spies in our press, and the spy might be the fellow living next door. We have proof that we are no more pure than people in other countries. They have been uncovered in governments of other countries. Well, there will be spies uncovered as time goes on, more and more, because there are many spies, enemy spies, working in this United States of America. You know, the CIA is not the largest intelligence agency. It's only the third largest. The first largest is the KGB of the Soviets, and the second is the GRU, or the Soviet military intelligence. The third is CIA, and the fourth is amazing. It's from a small country called Cuba with 10 million inhabitants, but it has the fourth largest intelligence agency in the world, called the DGI. And, of course, those three the KGB, the GRU, and the DGI, plus, of course, others, are operating inside our country in grand numbers. I remember reading in the press one day that Mr. Webster, who was then head of the FBI, now head of the CIA, said that there were more KGB agents in the United States than FBI agents. So, of course, how can we manage to track them down? And their obligation, their job in this country, of course, is to get as much intelligence as they can. Intelligence that, in many cases, is costing the American taxpayer a lot of money for that technology that they are able to rob, that we have to pay for. And I think it is important that people realize intelligence is a serious part of their defense. People would see, for example, that we have allies such as the Soviets, who we are becoming very enamored of these last days or last weeks or last months, who, when they were our allies in World War II in 1944, I tell of an instant there, it just happens to come into the story, but they were broadcasting in Spanish to the Spanish public that the American government, the United States of America, was an imperialist nation with expansionist tendencies, and that was the cause of poverty and all the trouble in the world. It astounded me. Here these Russians at this moment were receiving arms, weapons, to help enable them to win a war. Of course, they were helping us to win it too, but they were winning their own war, protecting their own country with our weapons and our assistance, and they were deliberately doing an espionage, propaganda against the United States. All that makes me very skeptical of what goes on really behind, not the Russian people. I think President Reagan was perfectly right when he said that. It's never the people of a nation one must fear. It's the governments of a nation. It's the system they have. And of course, we must remember that their system is opposite from ours. And I think my story, The Spy War Red, is an American mission in World War II. But it shows a little bit how that functions and how we must always beware. We were taught here in the United States that never to trust anyone, and in espionage, and that everyone has his price. And one sees that in this story. It is a very special story that was absolutely true in World War II in this story, and one sees how that is absolutely true.
Aline, Countess of Romanones, died in 2017. She was 94. Now you can get your copy of The Spy War Red by Aline, Countess of Romanones by tapping the link in our show notes, clicking the link in the description below if you're listening to this on YouTube, or by going to our website, heardeverything.com. We may earn an Amazon commission if you make a purchase. Heardeverything.com is where you can also hear my 1988 interview with the daughter of one of America's most notorious convicted spies, John Walker, his daughter, Laura Walker.
I think that most people believe that my dad was just sort of a mousy kind of guy who thought he was a James Bond, and he was extremely intelligent, and he could pull off the James Bond because he just seemed to have that ability. He was a pretty evil man.
And my 1998 interview with another woman who was part of another dangerous enterprise, organized crime, my conversation with Hollywood stunt driver and mob wife, Georgia Durante.
I really didn't know that this is what I was doing, but I was a wheelwoman for the mob. They were in these places, robbing these places, and I was driving the getaway car. But I had no idea that's what they were doing.
And of course, we post new episodes of Now I've Heard Everything every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and you can find us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening. Next time on Now I've Heard Everything, we're going to make you hungry for chocolate. My 2011 conversation with successful chocolatiers Ginger and Frances Park.
Anything covered in chocolate works, even insects. We actually get requests for that. We haven't gone that far.
We'll never carry chocolate-covered insects. Never.
That would require sampling, and I don't think I'm up for that.
That's next time on Now I've Heard Everything. I'm Bill Thompson.